Good morning. I am about to go to my brother's graduation in Los Angeles. So tomorrow, hopefully I'll read, but I'll have a different backdrop. Also, I fell asleep in a crazy position, and I know it's kind of late in the day for first seeing myself in the mirror, but I'm realizing that my hair really, you know how sometimes it's wet and then you sleep on it and then it's just not the way it is supposed to be. That's how it is. Um okay, well, you'll just have well, it's fine. Page 460, and this is like one of my favorite chapters of all time, and you can write that down. Okay, so what happened was the New York Times people, the Sulzbergers, they like are obsessed with him, and that one lady, the weird one, the daughter, her name's not Irina. Oh, Iphigene. Kind of an amazing name. That feels like a movie character name. Iphigene is like she's like on board with everything he's doing for the parks, even though she seems like a total prick, and like her ideal park is just like rolling hills with no children, no playgrounds. And so like even though she likes Moses, she's like, I wish there were I wish there were no playgrounds. Let's see what she did. Okay, so basically, when Moses when he tore down the Central Park Casino, which he did not have to do, he just simply did it to annoy Tammany Hall. He was like, I'm gonna replace it with a playground. And Mrs. Sulzberger, who hates playgrounds, she was like, no, I don't want to do that. And so she released something. Oh, she did a public protest in the press on December 23, 1935. Moses' letter of reply, which he released to the press on December 24, closed with the words, Merry Christmas. But the rest of the letter was couched in the tone Moses customarily employed with protesters. Your arguments, he informed Mrs. Sulzberger, are preposterous and, quote, irresponsible generalizations. It is difficult for me to believe that you seriously contend that the needs of the adult population are being completely overlooked in our parks. The letter even closed with a threat. This particular question does not seem to me to be important enough to quarrel about unless you insist on proving your generalizations, in which case I am prepared to refute them by a public exhibition of plans, photographs, maps, and supporting figures. It would have been interesting to see how the Times, which buried the exchange of letters on page 25, would have covered such an exhibition, but there was no need for one. Mary Moses saw to that. Mary Moses. The character I'm most interested in. A week later, the Sulzbergers and the Moseses were among the guests at the dance given every New Year's Eve by the, quote, Jewish Gatsby, Adolph Louison, in the great golden white ballroom of his Fifth Avenue mansion. Okay, I'm really interested in this whole situation here. Mrs. Sulzberger recalls that Mary came over, leading Bob by the hand like a little boy, and she said, You know, Iphigene's a good friend. You had no business writing her a letter like that. Now tell her you're sorry and you kiss her. Imagine your wife treating you like you're 5. Moses told her he was sorry and kissed her. And at 2 a.m., when the Sulzbergers, as was their custom every New Year's Eve, served friends a scrambled egg breakfast at their apartment, at 2 a.m., the Moseses were there as usual. Okay, why? That weird. I don't like them. They're like, I hate playgrounds and I eat eggs at 2 a.m. Weird behavior, weird behavior. Mrs. Sulzberger had too deep a sense of her responsibility to the public to take the insulting letter personally anyway. Okay, drunk breakfast is the best, but like 2 a.m. is not breakfast time. It's fine. You know, it's like, I don't care what people do, but that's just not something I wouldn't really have a breakfast. I would probably wait till maybe 8, 9 in the morning for my big, exciting New Year's breakfast. Robert Moses was too valuable to the city to quarrel with, she felt. And she was to tell the interviewer it was unappreciative to quarrel with a man who had done so much for New York. On the day after the New Year's breakfast, in an act of selflessness made all the more noble by the fact that her power made it unnecessary for her to perform it, Iphigene Ox Sulzberger, sacrificing her pride on the altar of what she believed to be the public interest, wrote a public apology to Moses and ordered it printed in her own newspaper. I owe you an apology for having said that we are completely overlooking the rights and needs of the adult population. No such sweeping generalization is warranted. I do, however, believe that we are in danger of paying too little attention to those rights and needs. You close your characteristically vigorous defense of the Park Department's plans with the remark that the issues raised in this particular controversy do not seem to you to be important enough to quarrel about. I and other members of the Park Association would dislike greatly any occasion to quarrel with you. You come close to our ideal of what a park commissioner should be, and we have no desire to be associated, even for a moment, with those who have attempted time and time again to hinder you in your plans for the rehabilitation and development of the parks. Mrs. Sulzberger's influence on the newspaper, of which her father had been, and her husband was, publisher, was not over. Intrusiveness was not her style, which was so reasonable, dignified, and soft-spoken that people sometimes mistook her gentleness for timidity. But as the Times historian Gay Talese has pointed out, no perceptive editor made this mistake. Her most casual remark, wrote Turner Catledge, later managing editor, would be treated as a command. Mrs. Sulzberger believed that Moses came close to our ideal of what a park commissioner should be. The Times evidently believed so too. Its reporters and editors may never have been directly ordered to give Moses special treatment, but during the 30s, as during the 20s, they were not so insensitive as not to know what was expected of them. Moses's press releases were treated with respect, being given prominent treatment and often being printed in full. There was no investigating of the facts presented in those press releases, no attempt at detailed analysis of his theories of recreation and transportation, no probing of the assumptions on which the city was building and maintaining recreational facilities and roads. The Times ran more than 100 editorials on Moses and his programs during the 12-year LaGuardia administration, overwhelmingly favorable editorials. Hi, Hajin. Welcome. Right now, Moses is fighting with an old lady who named Iphigene, great name, and she was high up at the Times. Her husband was the editor of it, and her dad founded it, I think. But he was feuding with her a little bit over parks, but they made up. Once trying in desperation to make sure that Mrs. Sulzberger got to hear both sides of an issue, LaGuardia, the mayor, invited her to visit his office to hear Moses argue with the official with whom he was currently feuding. Okay, new fight. City WPA Administrator Victor Ritter. She was not the only female present. The mayor, for some reason, possibly to create a homey atmosphere, had his adopted daughter Jean, then 8 years old, in the office too. We never hear about their families. This is the first time I'm hearing that LaGuardia has an adopted daughter that's 8 years old named Jean. I would have loved to know that. Anyway, okay, she sat on his knee during the ensuing discussion. LaGuardia's ploy worked. We don't even know why they're fighting, but at the end of the shouting match between Moses and Ritter, quote, they really went at it for a while, Mrs. Sulzberger would recall. The mayor ruled against Moses, and for once there was no Times editorial disagreeing with the decision the next day. But such a ploy could obviously not be repeated in every dispute, because Jean has to go to school. And in most disputes, Moses could count on the Times' support. Dramatic proof of how popular the press had made Moses was, moreover, available to the mayor every time he spoke in public. Just as audiences reacted with Pavlovian predictability to every mention of Brooklyn with laughs, that's so funny, they reacted with Pavlovian predictability to every mention of Robert Moses with cheers. At the end of the playground opening, there was almost invariably a 2, 4, 6, 8, who do we appreciate for Moses? We really need to be doing that more. Quote, LaGuardia wanted to fire him often, but he didn't dare, says mayoral law secretary Kern. The press, the New York Times in particular, had babied him like a spoiled child. He couldn't do anything wrong in their eyes. They made him a myth. And a man who had to go to the electorate couldn't fire a myth. Moses was too big to fire. Occasionally, Wendell's would try to brace the mayor to stand up to Moses. But on those occasions, the little flower, Hadjan, that's the nickname for Mayor. Also, Hadjan, you do not have to say if you don't want to, but the little flower is the nickname for Mayor LaGuardia. I can't remember why. There was a reason. Okay, so whenever the mayor was like trying to stand up to Moses, he would wail, "What'll the Times say?" If, from a personal viewpoint, it is not too much to say that LaGuardia liked Moses, from a political viewpoint, it is not too much to say that he feared him. At the beginning of his mayoralty, LaGuardia attempted to take an interest in the park department. When he received protests about Moses' plans for a local playground from a local organization, he would grant its representatives an interview, and if he felt their arguments had merit, he would ask Moses to reconsider. When some individual protested about a park department policy or alleged mistreatment by a park department employee, he would send the protest to Moses with a pink slip attached, a slip in the color code set up by LaGuardia to govern his relationship with his commissioners meant the mayor wanted an immediate reply. Oh, okay, Fiorello is Italian for flower. Cute. Yeah, he's in the book they talk about him being short so much. Like there was this one scene where he wanted to look over a fence and they like Robert Caro described him as like it was like a little boy. He pressed, he pulled his chin above the fence. That was one scene. I'm trying to think of the other ones. His height comes up so much. It's not as I feel like the best scene of a short person was the really rich guy who donated a park. What was his name? I'm forgetting, but I would get it in multiple choice, where they described him as like when he sat in chairs, he would just swing his legs. That was very funny. At the beginning of his mayoralty, but I feel like, okay, sorry, I'm just thinking. I feel like there aren't really any towering tall characters that we really like know are tall. Like, have we had a character where Robert Caro was like, he is so tall? Like, Robert Moses is pretty tall, right? But we don't really hear about it. I don't know. Oh, yeah, Heckscher. Heckscher was the guy. Heckscher State Park. At the beginning of his mayoralty, LaGuardia attempted to take an interest in the park department. When he received protests about Moses' plans for a local playground. Oh, right. Okay, I read that paragraph. So when Moses gets the immediate reply, pink slips, he would either ignore the pink slip or would reply by saying that the mayor must learn to stop interfering in the internal affairs of the park department. My policies can't be carried out if the mayor is going to listen to appeals from individuals, he would write. And if LaGuardia sought to press an inquiry, Moses would threaten to resign or take the issue to the public. Quote, if you disagreed with Moses, why, you were a public enemy, Wendell said. The mayor had no choice but to let Moses have his way. Wow, Moses is 6'1" and LaGuardia is 5'2". Is he really 5'2" or 5'7"? Oh, he is 5'2", sorry. I was misreading Hudgens' thing. Yeah, that is. By the end of his first term, LaGuardia was letting Moses have it. The Astoria Ferry and playground closing fights. Oh, wait, Hadjan. Okay, by the way, Hadjan is my friend. The Astoria Ferry was a crazy situation where there used to be a ferry from Astoria to Manhattan, but then while the ferry was in the middle of a route, Robert Moses wanted the land to be in the support system for a bridge, but he knew that like he had to wait, but he didn't want to wait, so he just ordered guys with jackhammers to just destroy the ferry depot, and then the ferry came back and had nowhere to park. It was a fun scene that happened a couple pages ago. Okay, anyway. At the end of his first term, LaGuardia was letting Moses have it. The Astoria Ferry and playground closing fights, which became public knowledge, were exceptions. Most of the disagreements between the mayor and the commissioner were kept secret because LaGuardia did not press them. When one threatened to become public, the mayor quickly backed down. He and Moses had been arguing over a 25-acre tract of land in Coney Island, owned by the dock department but unused. Moses wanted all the land for a park. The mayor was in favor of a Board of Education plan to use a few acres for a school. Please, let us have a school. When he imprudently mentioned to reporters that the location of a school on the border of a park is ideal, the reporters went to Moses for a comment. Quote, "I thought this administration wanted playgrounds. Either they do or they don't," he said. And he added what the Herald Tribune called some even more uncomplimentary remarks about the mayor. LaGuardia hastily scrambled for cover. "I can't believe my park commissioner made any statements," the mayor said. "No controversy exists, and none can be made out of it." And the school idea was dropped. He didn't want to fight with Moses no matter what, Lazarus says. As long as he didn't fight, LaGuardia had learned Moses would provide him with a seemingly inexhaustible cornucopia of political benefits. If he did fight, Moses would humiliate and defeat him. The little mayor had learned the hard way that it was better not to interfere. This has kind of the same, like LaGuardia being like, please, just, a small school. It kind of reminds me of when FDR was like, please, can we just have like a military marine academy? And Moses was like, no, like very publicly, until at the very end he relented, just only because he wanted to say no. Other political considerations which deterred the mayor from interfering with Moses in the fields he had carved out for his own were the same reasons that had deterred a governor, Roosevelt, from interfering. Moses' ability to complete public works fast enough to provide a record of accomplishment for an elected official to run on in the next election, his ability to build public works without scandal. I don't know about that. There's just weird, I guess they weren't scandals then. Now we're hearing about scandal-worthy stories. His willingness to serve as lightning rod to draw off opposition from the elected official, most of all, perhaps, his matchless knowledge of government. Says Judge Jacob Lutsky, who not only served in the LaGuardia administration, but was a top advisor to mayors O'Dwyer, Impellitteri, and Wagner. "You've got to understand, every morning when a mayor comes to work, there are 100 problems that must be solved, and a lot of them are so big and complex that they just don't seem susceptible to solution. And when he asks guys for solutions, what happens? Most of them can't give him any. And those that do come up with solutions, the solutions are unrealistic or impractical or just plain stupid. And those that do make sense, there's no money to finance them. But you give a problem to Moses, and overnight he's back in front of you with a solution, all worked out down to the last detail, drafts of speeches you can give to explain it to the public, drafts of press releases for the newspapers, drafts of the state laws you'll need to get passed, advice as to who should introduce the bills in the legislature and what committees they should go to, drafts of any city council and board of estimate resolutions you'll need. If there are constitutional questions involved, a list of the relevant precedents, and a complete method of financing it all spelled out. He has solutions when no one else had solutions. A mayor needs a Robert Moses. But there were new reasons too. Why LaGuardia found it politically unfeasible to interfere with Moses. And these reasons had the deepest and most ominous significance for the city. Some revolved around the federal government's newly expanded role in the city's affairs. That was its own paragraph. Always before, the city and the city alone had had the power to determine the priority, location, and design of public works because the city and the city alone had been paying for them. Every step in the construction of a school or bridge or park, from the initial preliminary study of the project's engineering feasibility to the final use of the power of eminent domain to evict citizens to make way for it, had to be authorized by the city government, by officials elected by the city's people. Therefore, those people retained ultimate control over the public works that did so much to shape their lives. The correspondence between their will and public works was, of course, not at all exact. Innumerable factors, chief among them, perhaps, the corruption that under Tammany Hall interposed private gain as an integral factor in the governmental equation, bent off its bias in the great drive shaft of the engine of city government. The drive shaft that, according to the blueprint for that engine, the city charter, was supposed to be turnable only by the public will. But there was a correspondence. A mayor strong enough to dominate the boards of estimate and aldermen would disturb the balance of the drive shaft, which was meant to rest equally on executive and legislative action. But because the mayor was an official elected by and ultimately responsible to the people, the crucial correspondence still existed. Wow, engine metaphors are a little tricky for me as someone who is not I'm not an engine head. I don't know enough about engines, but okay. But although the city's new mayor was dominating the city's government, that mayor was not controlling the construction of public works in the city to a similar extent. Not the city, but the federal government was paying for the bulk of those public works, and the federal government was much more interested in speed, in getting something to show for its expenditure, than in the considerations that would at least partially motivate a mayor: priorities, location, and design, for example. And because speed of construction depended on the existence of detailed plans, the federal authorities were therefore primarily interested in such plans. Because the mayor needed plans and needed them fast, he had no choice but to give priority not to those projects which were most urgently needed, but to the projects for which plans were available. And to a considerable extent, not he, but Robert Moses decided which projects those would be. Because not he, but Moses had the large, stable planning force of engineers trained to design urban public works on the new, huge scale made necessary by the growth of the city and made financially feasible by the new federal involvement, to a considerable extent, he could not even evaluate those plans. He could not argue intelligently for changes in the location or design Moses was proposing. A big thing about LaGuardia Hudgens that's kind of funny is that he idolizes engineers. He really wanted to become one. He goes to a special club in New York City called the Engineers Club just to hang out with them. But his dad, I think it was his dad, right? His dad wanted him to become a lawyer, so then he became the mayor. But deep down, he's always been I want to be an engineer. But he doesn't really know enough about engineering. And it's funny because one of the last mayors, the last major mayor, was a really corrupt one named Jimmy Walker, and he didn't want to go into politics either originally. He wanted to become a musician, and he sort of did. He had a few hit songs, but then he was definitely his dad that wanted him to become a lawyer, and so then he went into politics and became one of the most corrupt mayors in New York City history. But that was before. Moses's stake driving tactics had tied it up on park department projects. When plans were available, sometimes when plans were available, the labor was not. But Moses's stake driving tactics had tied it up on park department projects. Moses's popularity, moreover, made it all but impossible for the mayor to snatch the labor back. The convenient symbol of LaGuardia's frustration was the firehouses the mayor had wanted to build with the 5,000 men he had authorized the WPA to detach from park department projects in 1937. The 5,000 men he was unable to detach after Moses forced him to back down by locking the playgrounds. The mayor had 20 new firehouses in mind. He was able to only build 3. But firehouses were only a symbol. Schoolhouses, jails, and police station houses were also involved, as were hospitals, sewage disposal plants, sewers, and subways. LaGuardia was forced to cut back his planned programs of construction of almost every type of municipal institution except parks. Robert Moses's parks and bridges, Robert Moses's bridges and roads, Robert Moses's roads. The lion's share of the $1 billion+ poured into New York City by the New Deal was spent on Moses's projects. I didn't realize it was $1 billion. I don't really have a great concept of money when it comes to projects on that scale, bridge scale, but $1 billion still feels like a crazy amount of money. To a considerable extent, in the planning of large-scale public works in New York City during the 30s, Robert Moses operated independently of the elected official who had appointed him, and therefore independently of the people's will. The significant The significance of this fact for the development of New York is heightened by the amount of federal money involved. Even during the flush years of the Jimmy Walker era, New York's expenditures for capital improvements had run only slightly above $100 million per year. That figure represented, in dollars, the annual alteration, hopefully for the better, to the civic estate. But during the first 5 years of the LaGuardia era, the federal government, through the CWA, Civic Works Association, WPA, and PWA, contributed more than $1.15 billion for public works in the city, a figure which, when combined with the city's own expenditures, which LaGuardia was, by 1936, able to restore to the Walkerian level — Walkerian is awesome — meant that during these 5 years, the civic estate was altered more than it had been altered in the preceding 15. That New York was able to effect a far greater and more rapid alteration in its physical public structure than had ever before been possible. And this magnified Moses' influence in the city's destiny. Sorry, my hair is so crazy. The portion of its remaking, carried out independently of the people's will, was relatively immense. I'm assuming that it's 1930s dollars. Then there were other political deterrents to any interference with Moses by LaGuardia. Some were a result of the continuation and acceleration of Moses' evolution from scorner of politicians. The legislature hadn't changed much since the days when Robert Moses had been denouncing its corruption and avarice, but Robert Moses had changed. No longer did he respond to a legislator's patronage requests by telling him to stick it up your ass. The state park system was a vast reservoir of jobs, both year-round jobs and, because of the seasonal nature of park work, summer jobs particularly coveted by politicians who wanted their teenage children to earn good money in the open air during school vacations. And because the reservoir had outlets, parks, in every corner of the state, Moses had jobs to distribute not only on Long Island, but in the undeveloped, job-poor upstate counties in which the leaders of the Republican legislative majority lived. There was a line firmly drawn above which patronage was not allowed to intrude into the state park system. Top administrators, the elite cadre known as Moses men, still had to work their way up from the ranks. Still were promoted strictly on the basis of ability and willingness to work killing hours, and still owed their allegiance solely to Robert Moses. But Moses had proved more and more willing to fill lower echelon jobs with people recommended by key legislators. My favorite one of the jobs, well, the one we talked about for Jones Beach, was they would get people dressed really well, and he would get people that seemed, I don't know, high class, like college students, to follow people that littered, and then while the people that littered were right there, they had just littered, the people would pick up the litter and throw it away just to make them feel really bad. I think about that a lot. That is so funny. As for lucrative construction contracts, the one-time idealist had become known in Albany, according to Saul Kaplan, counsel to Assembly Minority Leader Irwin Stigant. Okay, so Moses has become known as a practical fellow who understands the facts of life and what makes things tick, a fellow who is prepared to cooperate with anybody. There was a point at which cooperation stopped, the point at which it would interfere with the completion of a project as Moses had originally envisioned it. He employed practical politics only to further his dreams. He did not allow it to interfere with them. Sometimes someone would ask him for something and it would interfere with what he wanted to do, and in that case, he'd say it couldn't be done, Kaplan said. But as long as you weren't a pig, okay. If you put a gun to his head and said either or, he'd tell you to go to hell. But if you laid the cards on the table and didn't try to kid him, he'd help if he could. And if he said you could help him in solving a couple of problems, you helped. This influence was increased by Moses' ideological compatibility with the key upstate or old guard Republican legislators. He was a conservative and they were conservatives, Wendell says simply. They distrusted LaGuardia, whom they considered a wild man and a traitor to their party, all a liberal using its label to get elected. They were infuriated by the mayor's all-out support of FDR and by his general disloyalty. Although he would be elected mayor 3 times on the Republican ticket, not once during his 12 years in that office would LaGuardia ever support a Republican candidate for state or national office. That's crazy. But because of the legislature's broad control over a city, LaGuardia constantly needed favors from it. Moses's influence with it could therefore be an asset to him, if Moses wanted to use that influence on his behalf. Conversely, the possibility that Moses would use that influence against him was a very real threat. At least once, an inoffensive bill that LaGuardia had thought would be passed routinely was inexplicably held up in committee while he was embroiled in one of his disputes with Moses. And although he never received any proof that his park commissioner was behind the holdup, the mayor received hints that he was, and saw it as Moses' way of letting him know what Moses could do to him in Albany if he wanted to. Whether or not Moses actually used his power with the legislature for or against LaGuardia, he made himself, in many instances, the broker between the mayor and the legislative leaders, often acting as the middleman in closed-door bargaining sessions. We're almost at the end of this chapter. We have like 2 more paragraphs. Moses' power in state government therefore increased his power over the city government, to which he, alone among state officials, also belonged, to a point where it drastically eroded the ability of the city's highest elected official, technically his superior, to control him. This, of course, was precisely what the framers of the state's constitution, and many reformers, had feared when they sought to prohibit the simultaneous holding of state and city jobs by the same individual. But the reformers had sacrificed the principle because they believed in Moses' unique abilities. They believed that Moses' unique abilities should exempt him from normal considerations, and because LaGuardia had assured them that his power as mayor made such a prohibition unnecessary. An appointed official not directly responsible to the electorate could never obtain power to defy the official who was responsible for his appointment, the mayor had said. But Moses had nonetheless obtained a large measure of such power. Coupled with the power he had obtained from his use within the city of federal money, it gave him considerable independence of the city's mayor. He was using forces outside the city to bend its highest elected official to his will. By employing forces outside the city's control, he was remaking the city in certain crucial areas without allowing the city any say in that remaking. End of the chapter. That was a fun chapter, but the ending was just a little bit like blah blah blah. But the start of it was awesome. I still think it might be one of my favorites. The other one that was really a good chapter was the chapter The Feather Duster, about when he started like randomly controlling things in the city, like when he became the boxing judge. That was another good one. The next one is 24, Driving, which I'll do tomorrow. Also, wait, I have a question. Farzan, if that's how you say your name, I tried to look up the thing you said about how the water polo Olympic champs all come from a landlocked part of, I think, Hungary. What water polo event was it? There's like, of course this is the case, but in the Olympics there's like a bunch of different water polo medals. Olympic men's water polo? Okay, like, let me see. I need to find the correct Wikipedia article. Okay, I'm on list of Olympic champions in men's water polo. Wow, okay, Serbia, Croatia, Hungary. And then the last time it was anyone else was Spain in 1986. But before that, it was Italy, and before that, it was Yugoslavia, Soviet Union, Hungary, Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, Hungary. And before that, it was Italy. And before that, it was Hungary. And before that, it was Italy. And then before that, it was Hungary. And then it's kind of random. I didn't know the Hungarian domination of water polo. That's kind of amazing. Someone made a blog about it. Ooh. What? Wait, find the blog. I want to read it. Whew, it's such a nice day today. My brother's graduating from college, so I'm gonna leave tonight. But I'm only gonna be gone for 2 days, which is kind of nice. Sometimes traveling is so fun, but other times it's just stressful. But I'm proud of my brother. He's 4 years younger than I am, and we graduated 2 years apart because I took a gap year after high school and he graduated in 3 years. That's not really that interesting to other people, but, it's a little it's a little crazy for me. I'm like, "Wow, my brother is so old." That's how he feels. Okay, if you find the blog, I will totally read it. Otherwise, I will either look for it myself or I'll be okay. Oh, you linked it? Yeah, I don't think it came in. Did you send it in the chat? I wonder if YouTube just filters out links or something. Um, Something funny that I'm doing later today is there's this guy on Wikipedia, who so he has this, like, very bizarre career because earlier in his life, he was a super successful, like, electrical engineer, computing researcher, inventor guy. Like, he's foundational to the field of, like, when you convert sounds to, computers. That's not a good example, but he also invented the optical, computer mouse. So he's probably a very rich guy. And he's spending his retirement like, he spends hours and hours a day fighting with people about capitalization of titles on Wikipedia, and I'm calling him on the phone later today, and, I'm a little bit nervous only because sometimes he's very, I don't really know what word to use in public considering that, like, he might see this, but he's just, like, intense, he doesn't really care about the feelings of people he's arguing with, like, he'll just try to decapitalize their articles, the titles of them, so if it's, one was the New York City subway stations. For, like, the, Times Square station, he would want the S in station to be uncapitalized, and sometimes people, are like, "No, this isn't the way it's supposed to be, this isn't how most sources do it," but he's just like he's very intense about it. And sometimes he gets warnings and sometimes he gets topic bans. He also does it in like very large swaths, but yeah, I don't know. I think he's gonna be interesting to talk to. Okay, that's all. I did get one Google result from that, so I'll check it out. Thank you. See you later.